congratulations and thank you. And also for putting me in a quandary, because I'll explain. I'm in a quandary because your opus, your love letter to the West Indian community in Britain, makes it incredibly difficult to just sit with you and ask questions, because it demands conversation. There's something about it that, particularly at this time, that feels that me asking you questions is a process of extraction, when really it has inspired, for me, a sharing of information, knowledge, because it's so intergenerational, and it's landing at a time where we can't be in those spaces with each other in those ways, with grandma, with mother, with sister, with brother, to react in the moment. I mean, does that resonate with you in any way?
Because of COVID?
Well, yes, yeah, primarily because of COVID, but also because it's landing a time where the Black experience, and not just the African American experience, but the British experience, is like a global running story now. You know, and I want to relate to that, some of that to Mangrove, in terms of the visibility about our narrative.
As dark as how says the movies, I don't care, I don't care, I don't care. I don't care. You know, when you see John Boyega in Hyde Park, naked, microphone, you don't care. It's time not to care. I don't. You think I'm thinking about white people when I'm talking? The reason that's important, as far as I'm concerned, there's a wider, broader public now, other than ourselves, is that people are finding their voices for the first time. Never forget, I saw, and it's kind of saying, I saw this interview with this singer from the Sugar Cubes, the Black girl who was involved, I can't remember her name now. And she was talking and telling her truth about the hurt she felt, you know, during her time in that group, and what things were happening to her. And people were listening, because a year before, everyone would dismiss it. No one even, people, you know, she wouldn't have the courage to come out and say things like that. And that's beautiful. She was being spoken, she was speaking in the way that she wanted to speak. It was absolutely, I was humbled by it, just as I was humbled by John in Hyde Park, you know? And these are young people, you know. I had to go through a time where I had to deal with those things in other ways. Me and you had to deal with it. We couldn't be as public, because basically it wouldn't be to our advantage to, and we needed to press forward. And it's crazy, you know, when I think of George Floyd, I remember I kind of blocked it out in a way, not because I wasn't aware of it, because this wasn't the first time. It had to happen time and time again. And in order for me to move forward as a human being, somehow I had to rewire my brain in order to sort of deal with it. Anyway, I just want...
Yeah, and that's what I'm alluding to, in terms of the fact that it also gives intergenerationally, there's a lot of Black people, and particularly in Britain, who do not still feel they can have these conversations with their parents, with their siblings. And what I'm saying is, in this particular time, we are going to have those conversations, but virtually. And there is something very tactile, experiential about it that makes you want to reach out in that moment and share and say, Mum or Dad, I didn't even understand or realize.
Listen, my father's best friends was Roland Gordon. He used to come to our house, one of the Mangrove Nine. I didn't know that until recently. My mother and my father didn't tell, oh, Roland, why you tell me that? You know why? Because people were suffering with PST. You know, people were suffering with this. It wasn't a joke. You know, now people are celebrating them. Beforehand, for how many years? So you're part of the community was celebrating, not all the community, because all the people didn't know. I was lying on the floor watching TV when my dad and Roland was having chats. I didn't know it. My mum didn't tell me. Only 15 years ago, I found out about the Mangrove. Really? I'm not telling you. I'm not kidding.
What struck me, what you're saying, that's something when I was interviewing Renee Edda Lodge, was saying that she had because a lot of what she wrote, I experienced. I turned 55, on Sunday, and she said, because where was this information archived? Where was this history archived? So she had to write that book. And yes, she appreciates the fact that there's many of us who are living, walking libraries, with this knowledge. And it's like what you're saying now in relation to the fact that it sparks the conversation that couldn't be had because of trauma. And that struck me with Mangrove. What you showed, and I think there was one scene, you know, when one of the many raids on the Mangrove, you know, the community restaurant, where the colander fell to the floor, and that lingering shot where you could just hear the metal against the hard floor just echoing. And the fact that you covered a lot of information, but you left that space for us to feel the devastation that we were witnessing. You know, those sort of touches are so important. And yeah, I want to come back to that whole idea around trauma, but also space, because that was also, for me, thematically, another element that came up in the films, you know, especially like, for example, in Lovers Rock. Yeah, about the importance of us being able to, and what we've always done and how we've always been creative about creating spaces for us to be safe, but also to be flawed and be imperfect. Yeah, so about the importance of that, what you wanted to, how you wanted to represent that, because they're in the stories, but you showed that, you conveyed that.
I think it's one of those situations where it was about lulling as well. It was about sort of meditations on, you know, in order for things to sit with you, and it sort of let it seep in, to take the time to digest, to reflect. You know, these are, you know, the things that we don't get to often to do because we're so busy getting on with every day, trying to survive, trying to put shoes on our children's feet, trying to not to be late, trying to get to that job, trying to stay in that job, trying to get the food on the fire for people coming back from school. You know, our lives as Black people are not easy. For my mother or my father or relatives to talk about the past in a reflective manner, you know, without that trauma, without that pain coming back, it's very difficult. Who wants to go there? So things get brushed over. And our generation, we have to excavate that. And also have those conversations, allow our parents and our relatives and loved ones to have that time to talk. Because I'm learning a lot from the younger generation. Because they're going to take shit. They're going to demand information. And rightly so. It's their generation. So I'm learning a lot from people like John and Letitia and others, you know. And again, I was just asking a second, you know, the day after the Mangrove trial, the day after, one of the Mangrove 9, Rockwell Kentish, got his arm broken, his leg broken by the police and got put in prison for 36 months. This is what people have to deal with. So, like I said, as an artist, you know, these aren't local heroes, these are national heroes. And that's why I want it on the BBC for everyone to see that these British subjects, how they fought and won against adversity, very important.
It also feels to me, and again, going back to, I mean, Mangrove made me, even though I knew the outcome, I thought we've got about 2 more days before we have the second lockdown, the national lockdown in England. And I wanted to go out onto the streets. I was that inspired and worked up and just connecting just to my parents' experience, because there's many people within my family I can have a conversation based on all, you know, the episodes really. But also it was struck me with Mangrove, not just the intergenerational relevance of it, but even within the casting, because spotting all these actors I've seen growing up over the years, you know, everything from, you know, Derek Griffiths, you know, William Gideon, you know, alongside Malachi Kirby, Gershwin Eustace Jr., who's doing a lot of major stage work at the moment, and Taj Miles. What was that casting process like for you? Because just that visual richness, even if there wasn't any dialogue, you know, I'm there just spotting. It's like, after watching it again and again, so I'm spotting, I haven't seen him for 15 years. And it just felt like it was a homage to them, as well as the historical figures that you were representing in Mangrove, like, you know, Frank Cruikshank, the reluctant, you know, hero.
You know, there's a gentleman, I can't remember his name, he was in the card room, he was playing cards in the Mangrove. And he's a guy who always used to pop up in his movies in the 70s and 80s. And then
Yes.
James Bond as well. And
Yes.
I wanted him. I said, I want him. Find him. I want him. Because to me, these are the people who are the pillars, and they need recognition, but also because they're genius actors. So these are the things where there's another layer for us to see, as well as the actual narratives, that other layer of people that we supported and championed over the years, and they've championed and supported us with their presence. So yeah, there's another layer. And I work with Gary Davey on this, the casting director, who bring in the older generation, and to appreciate them and give them the just sort of how can I say, respect, as well as a new younger generation. So it was very important. It was very, very, very important.
And I think that's the thing now, isn't it? Because I think that at this time, what you'll find with the younger generation, they'll watch and think, who's that? And they'll go back and again, there's conversation, or just do their own search. Just put it into Google or YouTube, and I think that revival, because another thing, again, isn't it? The thread, in terms of about, how can I put it? Bearing witness, unless we forget, because we do forget, it may be temporarily because we're saturated in information, but we've got an opportunity to constantly be triggered to remember that we can't forget these people, but also, again, where are the opportunities for these actors to show their skills?
Where's the opportunity for them to be themselves on screen?
You said about excavation, but it's also curation, isn't it? Because by you finding these these great actors, and then you are inviting them into spaces that are collaborative. Because one thing I know that John Boyega said the other day in the press meeting for Red, White and Blue, about how what struck him and what excited him about working with you was around the whole collaborative nature of it. That was what the actors were saying with Black Panther, being in a space with so many Black people who weren't just actors, they were creators, they were activists, they were mentors. They, in between scenes, they're discussing, the mentorship program they're going to set up, or something else they're going to do in the community. And so that thread that's been reflected in the films are being manifest in real life through these actors who are also activists.
The thing about John, for example, that was, when he was in Hyde Park, just before that, he was shooting Red, White and Blue, and after that, so his actual life sort of was interwoven into the artistic. What happened in Red, White and Blue was happening in his actual life.
Right. Yes.
He went back after he did the speech in Hyde Park to do pickups. Basically went off and do one of the biggest pieces we did was him walking into the snooker room after he doesn't get back up. So that performance, in some ways that had influenced him in a way, and he had influenced it. So it was a real sort of interwoven situation of actual life and artistic life. And he's amazing. We'll see what happens to him down the road, because we're definitely going to work again together.
Well, he already said, he's already said that's it. I think he's going to stick to you like glue now. That's it. That's it. He wants to, your discussions, but yeah, to continue that collaboration.
Can I just talk about Courtier Newton? How amazing!
I'm going to come to Courtier.
Yeah, let's get later. Sorry, apologize.
Yeah. No. That's coming. That's coming. There's no way. Obviously, with Love Is Rock and it's written by both of you, but the music in all of them is another character, isn't it? Because and Jim's. I was thinking, is it Jim Reeves? Mm-hmm. But yes, right. I'm hearing in Red and Blue, in Mangrove. But I'm curious about what Jim Reeves, what role the music plays, because obviously he's popped up more than once. Because we know the role that Jim Reeves played in our households and our lives growing up. But the role, the placement of music, almost like a character. If you can say something, speak to that.
I mean, that's authority in the house's music. That's my dad's music, my mum's music. My dad's music. Oh my God! Every Sunday morning, Lord Jim Reeves, and it's the only record we could play. And
yes.
Oh Lord, Jim Reeves. I remember the track called Daddy, oh Daddy, teach me how to. I mean, oh my God.
Oh, turn it off. Was it on the gram? On the gram?
On the gram. So I think what it was that, it's interesting because it was a colonial sound in a way, because it was Americans who basically infiltrated our airways with country and western, and somehow to do with the land, and most of our relatives were farmers, from the land. We kind of had a relationship with it, God and the farm, and all that kind of stuff. And it was seen to be authoritative. Maybe I have no idea. But that music was very key to, for example, Red, White, and Blue, in the sense of who was the authority in the house. And when, for example, the small Leroy turns on his soul music, and it's turned off immediately. It's who is the dominant, who is a dominant sound in the house. So that was one thing. With Frank Critchlow, when we put it on in the Mangrove, it was that Sunday morning feel. That's what it was about. And that's something that he put on because it was something which he knew. Yeah, that's all.
And you mentioned Courtier. I want to bring in Courtier and Alex Wheatle and Alistair Siddons. I mean, Alistair's, a long-term, collaborator. And I'm curious because one, in terms of why you chose to collaborate with all of them, and also the fact that obviously it's obvious that it's all men, and there's been some strong female narratives coming through the films. But I'm curious also, it's going to be sort of two questions. One, why Alex, he was a consultant on the one that's named after him, but you wrote it. So if you just want to say a bit about Courtier, and then about how you worked with Alex.
Courtier was such a gentle man.
Yes.
In the original meaning of that word, but also he's a great listener. He is the things when you don't think he's listening, he's almost like a sponge. And there's some things that he does with sentences, things he does with words, which are very close to a smell. And what I mean by that is very close to things that cannot often be detected. And that's his genius as a writer, and how that translates into scripts is there too. He's just a person who can, he knows the landscape, but he can add to it in a way which, as with a collaborator, I'm very grateful for, really, because in some ways I don't have to think, I don't have to explain. He knows, and that's always a wonderful thing to have. Similar to, and how different Alistair Simmons is. Alistair is a researcher, he's a documentary filmmaker, so he's all about the detail on things. And in Mangrove, for example, it was all about that detail, and the detail of how people lived. But that court case, because what happened, there wasn't sort of actual recorded documents up until I think 71. So he went back into research on, I think the Kingston Gazette newspaper, which was there every day of the trial. So he found all this archive sort of material of what was actually said in the trial. He was amazing in the sense of detail and how sort of that facts and just the facts and just amazing and the intricate details. So that those two were very different writers, but in what they collaborated with me is incredible. And also the thing about Alex, this is how we started, because I first had a writer's room. This was going to be a TV series. I had about 5 or so writers in the room. But it soon became apparent that this writer's room was almost like an audition room, who I wanted to collaborate with. And of course it was Courtier and Alistair. Alex Wheatle was in that room too, but Alex, he wasn't so forthcoming. And then what happened, at the beginning of talking together, we emptied all our handbags on the table as such to talk about who we were, where we came from. And I was always fascinated with his story. And one day I said, Alex, I think we should do your story. And he thought, me? Yeah, I said, your story, we should do your story. And he didn't want to write it. And I think sometimes it's difficult to have that perspective. So he and Alistair had long talks about, who he was, where he came from and so forth and whatnot. And to get it out of him. And he was a huge contributor to that script, of course. Language and so forth and what happened. So that's what happened.
Wow.
And Alex is a consultant on virtually all of the of the Small Axe film, because he actually lived in that time. We didn't.
What strikes me is all the people that you've gravitated towards and chosen to work with, what they're doing for the next generation, championing the next generation of writers and artists and so on. And I mean, coming to work, a national treasure is Leroy Logan and his story, because again, you know, in my life, in the past, I've met with and interviewed Leroy, and I think there's going to be a lot of things that are going to come out for people that they didn't know about him. I think he's going to put his role within the police force and the Black, you know, his pivotal role in the Black Police Association in a different light, again, in terms of just what he navigated, not just in his personal life with his father, to make that choice to be in the police force, and what he did and what was sacrificed, you know. I think that, I mean, what influenced your choices? Because there's, you know, obviously it spans 60s to the 80s, but there's so many of our stories that you could have chosen. I'm just curious about how you made that difficult decision.
Well, 3 of the stories was personal to me. I mean, no, Mangrove was always going to be one of the stories. That's fact. Mangrove was always going to be one of the stories. I mean, it was personal to me, but I didn't even know it. You know, crazy. Lover's Rock was about my aunt. You know, my uncle sort of opening the door of the house to my aunt to sneak out because my grandma was never allowed to go to blues. It was a Cinderella story. So that was a story that I knew about, and my grandma going to the blues and my aunt going to the blues and coming back before church, and you know. And education was my story too, because it was about my own history within the British educational system, combined with a situation which happened in the early 70s when, you know, a lot of Black children were bused to educationally subnormal schools. So I wanted to combine my story that actually happened in the 80s, but with the that happened in 73. So to combine those stories and those Saturday schools that I went to. I mean, I didn't know at the time, I was too young, but I attended the first ever Black Saturday school in Hammersmith. That was,
wow.
You know, again. See, I didn't know this until me telling these stories. My mum, what, Mum, where? Because I knew I attended another Saturday school in Acton. But there was another one, the first one, which was in Hammersmith, which I attended to, because again, and I want this to happen, like you said, this is our time. Through these stories, maybe people start opening up. Maybe people will start, talking about things that they've never talked about for a long time. I never forget when I made 12 Years a Slave, and we debuted it in Atlanta. Quite not very far away from where Trayvon Martin was killed. And this woman stood up, and don't forget, 12 Years a Slave. Before, there was not a lot of Black movies like before 12 Years a Slave in 2013, and this woman got up in the conference room because we were debuting it in I think it was the Black Journalists Association thing in Atlanta, conference Atlanta. And this woman stood up and said, "I've never spoken about this before, but my father was poisoned for teaching children how to read." She had never shared that before. So.
Wow.
The trauma that we as Black people go through, I'm hoping that this could start some sort of catharsis, can start some kind of situation where we can actually talk, because it's coming into our front rooms.
About harking back to Dark as How, you quoted him earlier, and there were so many quotable moments from Mangrove. And I mean, you know, when it's like what you said at the top of the interview, you know, he said, "I don't care about the verdict. History is on my side. History will take its course, which is often brutal." And you mentioned George Floyd, you know, and that is very, very true. And I think Small Acts is a timely reminder of how important that is. And it allows us to see how far we've come and what more we have left to do. But more importantly, the conversations that, like you say, and I feel, you know, this will facilitate. So I just wanted to sort of leave it that, you know, end our interview with that. And if there's anything you wanted to say in relation to that.
I say thank you. It is about the healing. It is about the healing. That's it. Thank you so much for a beautiful conversation, an advanced conversation. I really appreciate it. I've got to go now. I've been told.
I know, I appreciate that. Look, Steve, all the best. Wonderful to talk to you.